Hello, I'm Marian Arrowsmith, and welcome to our show. Today our guest is Melba Vander. Melba worked here she grew up in St. Tammany and then worked here as a teacher and an administrator. Had over 30 years in St. Tammany as an educator. So welcome to our show, Melba.
Thank you, Marian.
So good
so
to see you. Haven't seen you for a while.
It's been a while.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit. You grew up in St. Tammany. Tell us a little bit about what life was like then.
Oh, God, it's been so long ago. You know how old I am? Yes, St. Tammany was a normal setting. I grew up, went to a Catholic school in the primary grades, and from there transferred to the public school system. Graduated from the public school system, went to college, came back as a classroom teacher at St. Tammany High School for 4.5 years. Then after integration, I was transferred to Brock Elementary, where I taught for 10 years, and then I became an administrator. In 1978, I was principal for 22.5 years, and that's my life story.
Now, you grew up in Slidell?
I grew up in Slidell, yes.
Okay. Have you seen any changes?
Oh, have I seen changes? Yes. Too numerous to mention. But I recall one specific incident when I first graduated from college. My mother owned my mother and father owned a grocery store on the Covington Highway, 190. And Mr. and Mrs. Brooks used to pass there all the time. And he came in one day and he said, "Girl, what you doing with yourself?" I said, I was scheduled to go. I did go on an interview to Terrebonne Parish. He said, "Oh, we can't let our good people go to Terrebonne Parish." So he created a position for me in St. Tammany as a 5th grade teacher. And I've been there, I was there ever since. I appreciated that. I didn't have to leave home. But I worked under his supervision for, 4.5 years. Then I transferred. I worked under Mr. Clocher for 10 years. Not necessarily. I had Stan Kelly and P. Jabby also were principals while I was there.
Wow. Now, Mr. Brooks is the one that the Brooks Center is named after in Slidell today.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Who were some of the supervisors around?
Oh, my favorite was Ronnie Pogue. He was my favorite. He'd come in, and as a matter of fact, I think Ronnie was instrumental in getting me appointed as principal. Because he enjoyed my classes, and I enjoyed having him. There was Dick Clanton, there was Dealer Smith, Sippy Shane, and Mary Armitage, years back. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you recall all those people, but
I do.
I think I may have a few years on you.
Yeah, Mary Ellen Armitage was my supervisor when I first came here.
She was.
I was teaching in Folsom, and her house was actually right near there. Okay. And of course Ronnie and the rest of them. In fact, you have a picture here, I believe, of Dealis and Stan Kelly, don't you?
Yeah, this is when I was named Teacher of the Year in St. Tammany Parish. Mr. Kelly was principal and Dealer Smith was assistant superintendent, and they came in and we had a photo together.
Okay, great. And we have a picture of you when you were in...
At St. Tammany. I was in like 5th or 6th grade, I think.
5th grade.
Maybe a little bit 6th or something, yeah.
Okay. And you're right here.
Right there, the pretty one right here.
That's right, beautiful. And I believe you taught several people in 5th grade that...
I have Byron Williams. As a matter of fact, we were talking about that earlier. And in positions, I can't recall. Byron is number one of the that I taught.
And he often reminds us that you taught him.
Oh, he does. He really does. I recall, do you remember earlier I told you about the incident where we were in a math workshop together, and whatever the situation that was presented, I don't think he worked it correctly. He said, Melba Vander taught me math when I was in 5th.
So he blamed that on you.
He blamed it on me, but Byron is one of my favorite people.
Yes, he's doing a great job, and we're glad he's working in our system.
Yeah, Anthony Alfred, Israel Baptiste, we all were co-workers and administrators, and we worked together for years.
You were actually, I believe, one of the first, or the first woman principal that we had. I know when I came here, there were all just men principals.
Well, I joined the Klan, and when I was, after integration, I was the first, I don't know if it's certified or recognized administrator, first female. And then Ruth Dubuisson and others came afterwards, but I was the very first one in the parish.
Well, that's great. What influenced you to go into education?
What influenced me? Morris Safford, do you remember him?
Oh, yes.
Morris Safford was married to my mother's sister. And, the whole family went in education. There was 8 of us, and 7 of us went in education. But he convinced me to go in elementary education. I was contemplating going in math, but he said, "Girl, you better go in elementary education. You can get a job easier in elementary." So that's why I focused on elementary education. And when I came out, I had gone elsewhere for this interview, but fortunately Mr. Brooks came along and I got a teaching position.
So how old were you when you decided to go into education? Was that when you were in college, or did you know when you were
in high school? I've always wanted to be a teacher. There were so many teachers that I admired, but I can remember Mrs. Follins. She and her husband worked at St. Tammany as she taught PE, but she was one of my favorite teachers. And there were others that I liked. As a matter of fact, I think I liked all of my teachers.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
What are some of the interesting things you remember, some of your challenges maybe, and then some of the things that really stood out to you as important in your career?
The first thing was the integration. After, we could volunteer the first year, and I didn't volunteer, and they sort of drafted us, and we went, and there were different kinds of people and different situations. It was a matter of adjusting, and of course there were teachers there like Lil Watson, Carrie Rayford, Polly Atkins, all of my friends. Billy Pritchard was the secretary, but Lil and I had been instrumental in writing the Public Law 94142, and so after the integration, I got sent there, and fortunately she was there along with all of her friends, and Carolyn Sandoz, and so they accepted me graciously, and there was no problem. It was very little, to a minimum, because all of those people, Helen Taylor, they meant well. They helped us adjust, and I just rolled with the flow, I guess.
And Mr. Plochet was the principal there?
Mr. Plochet was the principal, yeah. Mr. Plochet was the principal for about 8 or 10 years there. Then Stan Kelly, Mr. Kelly was principal for about 2 years. And I'm not sure, Pete Jabby was there for about a couple of months.
2 weeks.
Yes. And he promised me faithfully he was not going to, I said, and we got tired of changing principals. So I don't know, that the teachers at school decided that, as a matter of fact, certain people suggested that I apply for the position. I had no idea of doing that. And so the teachers wrote a letter of support, and Mr. Shane saw fit to name me principal. And that's
and
about
a good choice.
Yeah.
You did a good job over the years.
So, yeah, the school wasn't accredited. We did ASCL, or we went through nights at waxing and mopping and stripping floors and getting ready for the team when they'd come by.
So you as an administrator,
1981, Brock was accredited for the first time.
So you stripped floors and waxed?
Oh yes, did more than that. We did. We got it together.
Did what you had to do.
We all worked together, and I could, can remember how everybody it was one joint effort. Nobody complained. We wanted it done. It entailed a lot, but it was worth it. It was worth it in the end.
Now, were you there when Margot? I know Margot Gallant taught.
Yes, Margot taught my son in 2nd grade.
Oh, wow.
Margot taught Mara. That's my oldest son.
So you said a lot of their family went into education?
My family? Mm-hmm. Oh, my oldest sister, she taught in Caddo Parish for years. My brother, Dennis.
Dennis Kuzan.
Yeah, he was a supervisor in the parish, welfare and attendance. And then there was my other brother. He went in math education, but he went into the military when he left, but he decided not to go into the teaching profession. That's Maurice. And then there's Doris. She's my favorite. No, I'm not going to say that. One of my favorite sisters. I didn't have but 2 sisters, but we were closer in age. But as a matter of fact, she taught at Alabama State. She taught at Southern University. But she had an aneurysm, and she died in '99.
So she didn't ever teach in St. Tammany?
No, but that's the year I retired, after she died. The next year I retired. I said, I'm not going to get like that on the job, because we talked about retiring together and doing things together. But and then my other brother, he's in Michigan, Bruce, and he's not in education, but he was in business administration. Worked with Allstate insurance. We're all over the place.
So you retired in 99?
Not 2000.
2000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I know you were instrumental in helping me when we were trying to get that after-school
Yeah.
program through the AG grant.
Yeah.
And you worked, and that was the grant before the big 21st Century Community Center grant, but that was our first little grant, and you were
Yeah.
very helpful.
Oh, we helped each other. You were helpful also.
So
Couldn't have done it without you.
but you always had your parents involved and knew you could get your parents to
Oh, yeah,
step up to the plate and do whatever needed to be done.
Yeah, they were always there for me. I failed to mention my oldest brother, which I shouldn't have, but he's the only one that did not go in education, did not go to college. And guess what? He's in a better position than any of us financially. we admire him for it.
What about your own children?
I have 3 sons.
Did any of them go into education?
No, ma'am. I have one that's an engineer at Stennis, and the second was he went to Southeastern in engineering, but he didn't graduate. But he was working at Mobile One installing those. And my second son is in the business of his own. He has his personal business, and now the two of them are the joint effort. They have a cleaning service and he does installing the radios and the videos and stuff in those vehicles. But I'm proud of all 3 of my boys.
That's wonderful.
I have 3 grandchildren. I have Andre. Andre is 11, and he lives in Baton Rouge. That's Marlon's. And then I have Sydney and Taylor. All my girls. That's Mara's 2 girls, and Mara's wife Karen. The girls think they think they're the grandmother and I'm the granddaughter. So they boss me around, but I love them dearly.
So you've been doing a lot with them since
yes,
you
that's
retired.
what I do most. I spend most of my time with my grandchildren.
Well, what are some of the other stories that you can share with us about your time at Brock or in St. Tammany?
In St. Tammany, some of the major things that I appreciated from my
You got your school SACS accredited, which was
yes,
a
and
big deal.
One of the major things that I wanted, that I did work to accomplish, was the computer lab. There were no computers. We had very few computers, but then we were one of the first schools that had a computer lab in the parish. We worked with the PTA, a joint effort with the PTA. We raised money, and we were partners with Dave Martin, Allstate Insurance, and he offered a lot to us. As a matter of fact, we were one of the first schools, if not the first school, to have a fax machine, because he donated it to us when he was our partner in education.
So you'd say technology changed a little bit over the time?
Oh, yeah, technology changed, and I guess we had when I first went there was a grouping of the children. They would medium, low, and high groups.
Ability group.
Yeah, ability group. But we got to the point where we had students helpers and monitoring, and we got to the point where we discontinued that practice because that sort of caused a hardship on some and resentment on others. So we really we accomplished a lot at Brock while I was there. I'll take credit for a lot of it because I see a lot of people now, and they would say, "You need to be back at Brock." I forget that. But anyway.
But you were back at Brock last week,
I went
weren't
last
you?
week to
Tell us
see.
about that.
Superintendent invited me to see Michelle Obama, the first lady, when she was there with her program Let's Move. I enjoyed it. I was, it was great to see it. I've seen the first lady, and she was good. She was pleasant. A lot of old parents I saw there, and I'll always be Brock will always be a treasure to me in my mind. It'll be a place of.
You'll always be a member of that family.
I'll always, even though some people don't think so, I will.
Who are some of the other people that you remember?
From the education system? Let's see. We had Miss McNeely. She was in music, wasn't she?
Mm-hmm. And superintendents while you were here.
I started out with Zippy Shane and Lenny Montleon. Lenny Montleon was a real treasure. Terry Bankston. I knew we had personal relationships, and even Gail was not there when I was there. The last one was Lenny. So those are the superintendents that I was Zippy Shane.
Of course, Richard Tanner was briefly.
Oh yeah, he was briefly. Richie was an assistant superintendent all the while I think I was there, except he was a principal, administrator, superintendent for a brief period of time.
One of the challenges I remember in visiting Brock was that you had some growth issues. And you had to be creative as to what you did with all of your students.
Well, we did. We had an influx at sometimes that some of the teachers complained, which they legally had a right to. There was an abundance of children before they started with the 21 ratio, pupil-teacher ratio. That was a blessing when that came to St. Tammany Parish. And I can remember when I first got there weren't enough children for 2 or 3 levels, so we were supposed to have combination classes, and I spoke against that and that's the year they discontinued having combination 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and those two because it just didn't work out.
Well, and didn't you have to put some buildings across the street? And then
we had to build
street?
Yeah, we had a new building. Because as a matter of fact, we had a brand new building in the back, for all 4th, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, and we had special students in there. Then we started getting the non-cat, and then we started getting 4-year-olds, and it just took up more space than we had.
Earlier you mentioned helping to write 94-142.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. Tell our listeners what 94-142 was.
It was provisions for special education. I can't exactly remember what we were providing for. It was grant monies that we had received making provisions for our special ed students. And at that time, there weren't that many identified special ed students. But Bill Barker was the supervisor then. And we went to Southeastern, and there were several of us there from different parishes, and got together and wrote the Public Law 94142. And that's how I got to meet Leah Watson, and there were 2 other teachers in the parish that were chosen. And it was quite detailed. We visited a lot of parishes and a lot of places.
Because at the time, we really had no provisions for special ed other than a pull-out for severe. They went to a different setting. They weren't on our school campuses. And that was instrumental in beginning special ed, which of course now is just such an integral part of
it's a large part of the curriculum.
Right.
Yeah, but it was worth it.
Okay. Anything else you can think of that you'd like to share with our listeners?
None other than when you guys would come by and help me out, lend a helping hand, all the administrators and supervisors, help to make a good principal, a good administrator out of by listening to others and patterning after those, taking suggestions, using them constructively, not being negative at all, about any new suggestions or new trends in education. You have to roll with the flow. It's not sometimes it's not what you'd like to do, but for the betterment of the children. And this is what most adults fail to realize, that education is for the betterment of the children, not the teachers, not the administrators, not the custodians, not the cafeteria workers, but the children.
And we're never there.
No.
We're always reaching higher.
Yeah, never reaching, we have continuously going forward.
That's right.
Reaching higher and higher goals.
So.
And this is why St. Tammany Parish is so well known now, and so well, it's because educators like you and others have done that. And it's made St. Tammany what it is today, and it's a pleasure to be one of St. Tammany's retired employees.
Yes, and I think we've all learned together.
Yes.
I mean, we learn from each other.
Yes.
Build on everybody's
And when we see each other, it's just to bring back memories of the
does.
things that we used to do.
A lot of fun.
Yes.
You have some other pictures here. You want to tell us about these?
Oh, those are very important. Those are just one that when I was named principal, and others when I retired.
And it starts off, the currently all-male group of St. Tammany Public School principals will soon have an unfamiliar female element among their ranks.
Yep.
That was you.
That was
great. Okay. And
this is when I taught schools. We did a field trip to the public library when we were doing a unit on library science. And we did as a matter of fact, I think this is my son's class. And then we had another interesting class, field trip. My class was chosen to go to do on the food and nutrition unit. and we wrote letters to different politicians. Well, we even wrote to the president. We had several different, for their favorite recipes. And one we got back from a father. His son wrote to his father, and his favorite recipe was, what did he say? It had to do with bricklaying, brick mortar. I said, we were talking about edible recipes, but we got them from the governor, we got them from the president's office. And we did, we went to French Quarters, and the children got a chance to shop at French Market, and it was an interesting unit. We came back and brought the information back to to St. Tammany Parish, to the different schools we presented. But I just thought about this. In conjunction with Public Law 94142, we have to come back and do something special for to compensate for the monies we received. So I had to teach a class at that observation room in Covington, and I taught a unit, I remember it, on latitude and longitude. And I had one of my students, the room is such a big, pretty room. He said, his name was Derek Archer. He said, Miss Vander, why don't we have a big classroom like this in the middle of class, at our school? I said, Derek, maybe we can ask Superintendent Shane about this when we leave this meeting. In the meantime, we're talking about meridians and parallels. But I can remember having to do that.
And the room you're talking about was a big room, and it had the two-way mirror in the back.
Yes.
And behind that, obviously.
Yeah, we were teaching, and all the teachers were observing us from, a parish where I was observing me and my class in that big room. And he decides he wants to know why we don't have a room like that at St.
Well, it's a good question.
Yeah, and it was a legitimate question.
Right. In fact, Brock has now been totally rebuilt.
Since thanks to Katrina, and it's different.
Beautiful facility.
And it was badly needed.
Well, that was an old building.
It was one of the first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was originally Slidell Grammar School, I believe.
As far as I remember, yeah. Slidell Grammar, Slidell Elementary, and then Brock Elementary after Mr. Brock. That's another supervisor that I remember.
Well, tell us about Mr. Brock.
Mr. Brock, I know very little about. I know his family. They'd come to each time we had a function at school, we would invite the family on his behalf after he died, and his wife would come. Mr. Brock, the only thing I can recall about him was coming into my classrooms a couple of times.
Now, was he principal there at one time?
Yeah, he must have been.
And then
before Mr. Ploshy, I guess. I'm sure he had to have been for the name of the school after him.
And then he was a supervisor.
And then he was a supervisor, yeah. He supervised when I was at St. Tammany, working at St. Tammany, he was a supervisor.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
Yes.
It was a pleasure being here this morning.
So, well, it's been great having you. Before we leave, I'd just like to ask you one last question.
What is that?
What words of wisdom would you give to new teachers coming into the district or new administrators starting out?
The one thing that my piece of advice would be to remember that the children come first. You're not going to always appreciate the things that you have to do. And then again, some of the new teachers might, hopefully they will, but think about the children. Those are the ones that are important. Somebody taught you, and you need to teach somebody to prepare them for the future.
So
always put the children first.
Is it best for kids?
Exactly.
So
don't think you're too good to teach the children now, because it takes somebody who loves the children, who understands them.
Okay. Melba, thanks again for being with us. It's always good to see you.
Thanks for having me.